Across the Park podcast is proud to be sponsored by Globe Gas and Heating. For the best kitchen and bathroom renovations, boiler servicing and repair, and central and underfloor heating in the Northwest, head over to globecentralheating.com and quote Across the Park for a free quote. Hello, welcome to a special episode of Across the Park podcast. Myself, Ian Mills, delighted to be joined by author Jim Keoghan. Jim, it's fantastic to get you on a podcast. I'm a big fan of the book, The Highs, the Lows, and the Bakayoko is one of my favourite books. We're here to talk about your brand new book, Everything You Wanted to Know About Everton, but afraid to ask. We're going to get into it. First of all, thanks for coming on the podcast. How are you doing on this cold but bright Wednesday morning?
I'm doing good. I mean, Everton doing well definitely kind of puts a spring in your step. So it's unusual to be kind of a happy blue at the moment. So it's I'm feeling pretty good.
Feels good. We had a podcast this week with Mel Harvey, and she was saying the same. It feels good. Let's hope we can keep the momentum going. Tough fixtures coming up. Before we get onto your book and yourself, how have you found this season? Obviously, deductions hurt us, but if you take that away for now, have you been impressed by how the team have performed this season?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like an Everton team for the first time in quite a while. I think it reminds me a lot of when Joe Will came in the 90s, and I think you got like a stronger affinity with the players. It feels like now there's a kind of there's a blueprint to what we're doing. There's a group of players there who you feel like understand what the game means to us. And there's something to buy into. I mean, I know it won't always get results. We'll obviously lose games over the coming months.
Yeah, of course.
We'll hit more bumps in the road. But I think, bear in mind how bad things have been in recent years. You think of the low points under like Benitez and Lampard at times. And you felt really, especially under Benitez, when you felt really divorced from what was going on. To a point where I've never really felt like that before towards the club. To kind of, in recent weeks, to really feel kind of a strong connection to what's going on, and the sense that Everton seem to be going somewhere, possibly for the first time, maybe not under Machedi, really, that we feel like there's a direction to the club and things seem to make sense. And that's what you want so far, isn't it? Obviously you want to win. Yeah. You want to feel that connection and fit and the sense that the players understand what you want from Everton, really. So it's it's obviously not been the best of seasons because of what's happened off the pitch, but it's I feel like we're in the best place we've been in the kind of football sense for some time.
Yeah, I agree. And look, I've said on this podcast before, Jim, I just want to sleep come the last week of the season. That the past 2 seasons, it's been, I don't think you realise how much things mean to you until you're looking down a trapdoor. I was having sleepless nights leading up to Palace and sleepless nights leading up to Bournemouth. I'd wake up, I'd look at my phone to check our team news, leaving the kid crying. You know what I mean? It consumed me, so I just want to sleep. And I do think this team has got enough about them. If you can get through the January window, because what I don't think a lot of people have took into account is what comes with good performances is interest from clubs. I do think some clubs will look at our players in January. I think we've got to navigate through that. If you get through that, I think we'll be all right. On to you, Jim. Your Everton journey. Where did it start? Favourite players, first games, first memories?
Oh, it started with a threat, to be honest. I was kind of, when I was very little, I quite like the colour red, and I was skating with kind of the dark force from over the park, and my mum, who's an absolute fanatical Evertonian, she's told me that Father Christmas doesn't visit Evertonians, Liverpudlians, it only visits Blues. So at kind of age 4 or 5, I thought, well, I'd better make the shift so I get presents. And then that coincided with kind of the 80s. My first game was Kendall's first game. And then when I was kind of at that key age of 8, 9, 10, you really fall in love with football. It kind of coincided with our glory years. So kind of before the age of 11, I'd seen Everton win 2 titles, FA Cup.
Amazing.
So it was a really good way to cement that connection with the club. But the weird thing was I thought that's how it would always be, because to my kind of 10-year-old outlook, I thought Everton were just amazing and they won trophies. I didn't really realise that, that's the blip, and actually the reality is the last 30 years of kind of struggle and disappointments.
Was there a moment in time when you were up? I imagine there was, but can you pinpoint the moment in time when you were supporting Everton and you thought, I want to start writing about this?
That's a good question. No, I've been writing for years, but I think it was back kind of around. I'd written a book about kind of supporter culture back in 2012. It was just kind of general supporter culture and supporter ownership, and I've been dabbling in kind of a few blogs in there on Everton. But I felt like it was around then I thought that the 90s hadn't really been covered for us, and it was such a kind of interesting decade for Evertonians, I think, because you got this weird combination of the fans becoming more engaged with the club after Wimbledon and kind of numbers going up and the field got better. But alongside that, you've got Everton really for the first time in the club's history dropping off the elite. So this weird combination and the kind of almost like the formation of a new sort of Everton who were maybe the best we could hope for was to be the best of the rest and not part of kind of the big four or the big five at the time. But at the same time, the kind of the emergence of a new sort of Evertonian, quite angry, often quite disappointed, funny. We could laugh at our own failures. So I thought it's a really kind of interesting time. And so after I'd written that kind of supporter ownership book from football, I thought I'd try and get stuck into the 90s and kind of explore my own fandom in that decade. And so what happened to the club? Because it's a very weird decade for Everton because it's got our last cup. It's got two near-death experiences. It's got this huge change within football itself and how that relates to Everton. We got a new owner, and we think that we're going to turn a corner, and it ends up, going wrong. So it's and we emerged at the end of the 90s a very different club to the end of the 80s. So that's kind of. I was always writing, and I was looking around thinking that there's definitely a book in this, and that's kind of where Highs and Lows came from.
I love that book, The Highs and Lows, because you've just said there your journey was the 80s. I wasn't that lucky. My journey was the 90s. And it was like, I remember the start of that. It was weird because I was brought up on VHSs of like 85, 86, 87. And then I was sitting in half-empty stadiums thinking, like, what is it? I mean, I was trying to explain, like, what's happened. There's a lot, at that age, I don't get it, but and you revisit in time in that book with you, and you put so much detail into it. One of my favourite books of all time, honestly. I really enjoyed The Highs, Lows and Bakayoko's, but you've done a couple more books as well. You've done the iconic number 9 shirts, the greatest games, Everton's greatest games. They were a bit more serious than the Highs and Lows, and you seem to have gone back to more. Like, I was reading this, and it's one of those books. I'm not just saying it. You don't want to put it down. I thought I'll flick through. I ended up nearly reading the whole thing already in like 2 days. It's been really good, but lots of elements of comedy in there, similar to the Highs and Lows. You've said there, let's laugh at ourselves. There's lots of that in there. How do you sit there, and where does the brainchild come from where you're thinking of a book? Because obviously you've dabbled in more serious books and some comedic books. So this one in particular, where did the brainchild come from? When did the cogs start turning?
Well, I was thinking of doing a book just to kind of looking at basically everything about Everton. Like, kind of other clubs have got sort of miscellanies where they just cover kind of greatest games, greatest managers, greatest moments, greatest players, and you got all the facts and figures. But there's always a danger there that it becomes it can be a bit dry, and also it's a bit too much of kind of a pat on the back. Aren't we great? Look at this. But I think the nature of being an Evertonian is you've got to have the light and the dark, and kind of our ability to find kind of laughter in the dark as well. So when I was doing this, I was very careful just to make it not just all those great moments are in there. You've got Bayern, you've got the league titles, you've got the FA Cups, you've got the amazing number 9s, the great managers. But I think you've also got to include Mike Walker, Benitez, our top 5 hate figures, Liverpool, non-Liverpool. You've got to have the moments of frustration, kind of the refereeing problems we've had in the derby in particular. So the idea was kind of to give a history of the club, but also to give maybe a handle on why Evertonians are the way we are, kind of what makes up the modern Evertonian. Why are we, those Everton that moments and our abilities to kind of laugh at ourselves. Because we are very different to Liverpool fans. They cannot laugh at 100%. Themselves. They take it very seriously, and they are so thin-skinned. Whereas Evertonians have this kind of rich heritage of finding the funny side and the frustration and the many disappointments that we've gone through. So hopefully what the book gives is, as it says, everything. It's in there, all our glory, our less impressive moments, and also kind of what it is to be a Evertonian as well.
Yeah, you end the intro to it in such a great fashion. You've said it's something unique, and it's a grand old team to support. And listen to you there. One thing that came into my mind where you're saying we can't laugh at ourselves is how many times do they proper Everton? We say that all the time, don't we? We do laugh at ourselves, and this book really does summarise it. I'm flicking through, and I don't want to spoil it. We are going to do a little giveaway at the end, but it's basically formatted with like sort of subheadings, and we go into different chapters. I'm looking at it, and there's stuff I didn't know, and I class myself as a really, historian, knowledgeable Evertonian. Is this everything in this book? Is this from your own memories, or was a lot of stuff that you had to go back and research to jog your memory and stuff?
There's a lot of research now. I think I like a lot of Evertonians. A lot of your really in-depth knowledge is based around kind of your lifetime. So I think for me, 80s, 90s and onwards, I don't know everything about the club, but I feel like I know a lot. And then the years before that, prior to writing these books, my knowledge was patchy. I knew about the greats, I knew about Dean and Lawton and Hicks and people like that, Latchford. I didn't really know the ins and outs of Everton. So through writing this and writing Everton's greatest games, and to an extent Everton number 9, there's so much fantastic material out there. Evertonians have painstakingly put together histories of the club. There's one of the things called a blue correspondent who's basically transcribed every match report from kind of that editing, real kind of labels of love. So it's all out there, and it's for me it's a great experience to spend the time to kind of luxuriate, I guess, in the history of the club and to find out as much as you can. I'm sure I've missed stuff. You're talking about a vast span of time. There must be certain players who made their mark that maybe haven't been covered, and certain games as well. But I mean, hopefully I've kind of given a proper taste of our history and kind of what matters to us, I think.
Again, not to spoil it, I don't think I will spoil it by asking this question, but it's not in any sort of correct order. Like, it starts off in sort of the origins and the colours, and I started thinking, we're going to go into, because you go into Fred Geary, and I'm thinking we're going to go into Dixie Dean, and then we're going to go into the School of Science. And then we go into Dennis Strachulesi, like 3 pages in. Did you purposely write it like this, that you didn't want it in a sort of that order?
I didn't want like a narrative sweep. I wanted to be kind of, you'd find out one thing, and and you say you think that you're dealing with the history, and suddenly you get kind of cult figures, and then you flip to terrible manager, and then it's the great manager, because the nature of supporting a fan is quite erratic. If this season proves that, we can go from horrendous lows to heady heights in the space of a couple of weeks. I think that's hopefully, again, that's kind of that's what the book hopefully gives you. It's that kind of the ups and downs, the great, the not so great, the funny, the not so funny, and you get to the end of it and you think, well, I've experienced what it is to be a Blue, and I've hopefully learned more about the club as well.
One of my favourite ones is you speak about Erling Haaland, and I won't ruin it, but there's a story in there about Erling Haaland. Believe me, it's if you don't know it, it's well worth buying this book just for the Erling Haaland story. And I've heard little bits of that in the past, and you covered it very well. There's some serious stuff as well. You talk about the European ban, you talk about transfers, and you talk about players who are not fit to wear the shirt. So you can really feel, and Evertonian has wrote this, it doesn't feel like someone sat there and it's been ghostwritten by someone who's half-assed. It really does feel quite personal, and there's lots of comedy and there's lots of information in there. I think it's a brilliant book, and I'm happy that we've got a copy to give away to our listeners and our viewers. Before we do get to that, what was your favourite part about the journey of writing this book? Is there one part of the journey that's a bit more special than the rest?
That's a good question. I think what was nice is when I was writing it, things were difficult on the pitch. So whilst I had no escape from Everton, which is in itself quite frustrating, because I'd be following the Blues and then writing about it and researching all week. It's nice to get a reminder of just how good we have been and how big and special we are, because it's easy to forget that, because it's been quite a long time since you've won a cup. The last 10 years, incredibly frustrating for Evertonians. Sometimes it's easy to forget when you're bombarded with kind of Sky Sports and how these clubs are amazing, the City of this and Liverpool of that. You forget that historically Everton are massive. But we are a bit of a sleeping giant, and we've always been, well, really until the 90s, we were at the forefront of the game. We were progressive, and we and kind of we set the pace at times. And we were always part of apart from a few blips in the second division, we were always part of the conversation in the high reaches of the first division. I mean, we had our lean times, but we were always in and about with title runs, and we won trophies here and there. And we were a massive club. So it's just nice dipping in and having that reminder when you're fighting relegation, when your owners Machete, when you got managers coming and going. It's just nice to kind of during the week say, well, wait a minute, this is Everton is something special, and we are a great club. And hopefully we will be again.
Yeah, I hope so. Look, another question for you about how you work and how you write. I'm not an author. I haven't got that gift, but the way I've read this book, it seemingly takes a bit of a life of its own going through it. Is that the case? Does sometimes when you're writing it go to a direction where you didn't really expect?
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, you kind of. I mean, I sketch this out, but actually, as you're writing, different things come up, and also it's not a kind of fixed story. Everything's always changing. So, for example, the section on Machete, I had to rewrite about 9 times because the narrative around him and how we see Machete keep shifting. The Kenwright entry had to change as well. Even the one on kind of the terrible referees and derbies. I had that all set, and then we had the recent derby. You think, well, I've got to add another thing. So it's a very fluid story, and it's and I think it'll never finish really because I put the book out, and then a week later we get the 10-point deduction. There's another saga to go through. So it's we are. It feels like in recent years it's been moving even quicker because it seems like a weekly thing now. With things are kind of going wrong or happening, but it's that sense of kind of. Yeah, it's never really finished, and that kind of you're never really sure where a book like this will ultimately end up.
So Jim has kindly given the podcast a copy of the book, which is also it's got Jim's signature on as well. So it'll be worth a few quid in a few years once you get bored of it, if anything else. But I guarantee you won't. It's a really, really impressive bit of kit. This I've really enjoyed reading it. I'm going to keep hold of a copy as well. I'm going to buy a copy. But Jim, if our listeners and viewers do want to buy a copy, I believe Amazon is the best place. So amazon.co.uk, and if you search your name or search your title, is that the best place to buy it, or is there other places? Is the hard copies available as well?
So right now that's the only place to buy it. But I'm hopefully after the new year going to talk to the Everton Heritage Society and hopefully get a few copies into St Luke's as well.
Oh, brilliant! And I'm looking at the prices here, and this time of year, where everybody wants everything to do with Everton, and it can cost an arm and a leg. The prices are absolutely brilliant. £9 for the hard copy or £5 for the Kindle. Unbelievable! What a gift that would be, Jim. It's been great to get you on. I can't not ask you the question I ask every Evertonian. We're going to be all right this year, aren't we? We're going to be all right. Make me feel better.
So. I think so. I think if you asked me a few weeks ago, I said maybe not, but I feel like the point deduction will get reduced, and even if it doesn't, I feel like as long as we keep everyone relatively fit, I feel like we've got a manager now who kind of understands what we need right now and what kind of team Everton requires. So I don't think we're going to kind of necessarily get out the bottom half, maybe, but I think come April, May, I think you won't be getting sleepless nights, and I think we might, finally get to have a relatively boring end to the season, which really, compared to the recent season, is all we really want.
I'm all for it. Bore the crap out of me in April. Honestly, I'm all for it, Jim. It's been fantastic to get you on. Everything you wanted to know about Everton, I'm afraid to ask, is out now. If you want to follow Jim on the socials, on Twitter, his name is there. Just put an underscore in between the first name and the second name. You'll find him. Give him a follow. Anyone who's watching this video, please put this in all the WhatsApp groups, the Everton WhatsApp groups. Let's spread the words. Such an amazing book that's out now, available. Jim, thanks so much for joining us on Across the Park podcast. If I don't speak to you again, have a great Christmas, my friends.
Cheers. Thanks very much, you too.